My friendship with Fireball has ended. Scorch is now my best friend, and it can be yours too. What's up, guys? This is Preheat. So this video, I'm going to try to break it into 2 parts. There's a lot more I want to talk about when it comes to this build, but simply for the sake of time, I want to just get this one out right away so you guys can know about it. Just because the window on this is really tight, right? Like, you don't have much time to get your Severe 3 pieces. So if you have any interest in this build, you know, stay tuned for part 2. We'll be getting to that as soon as I'm able to get that video out, probably later in this week. But for now, we're just going to go with what we have, the information available to us right now, because I feel like this is really something that you guys are going to want to hear about. All right, so what we're talking about today is what I'd like to refer to as the golden crit build. Basically, the idea behind it is you get your crit chance up to 100% as a fire mage. Normally, crit's like your worst stat, right? Like, I'm sure you've run your stat weights. I'm sure you know about how bad crit is for you, but there is one special caveat to that, right? So if you're able to achieve 100% crit, then you no longer have a need to cast Fireball ever. Basically, you can just take Fireball off your bar, right? Just never use Fireball again, right? Basically, you use Scorch in the place of Fireball. Obviously, the damage on it is low, but same with Fireball damage, right? Like, Fireball, I think, contributes on the Masterful build as only like 4% of your damage or something crazy low like that. So, yeah, you aren't really missing out on much. And basically, this allows you to have a guaranteed everything, right? Like, everything is guaranteed to always crit, and basically you're always going to convert your Pyroblast into heating up. You're always going to convert your you know, your heating ups into hot streaks. Basically, it's like got this compounding effect where everything always crits, so it gets really interesting. Now we're going to show some information from the actual game here. Let's swap over to that. Okay, so what we're looking at right now is my character in game. I just want to show you guys that this is real, right? Because I know a lot of people are a little bit skeptical. They say, how do you get to 100% crit? You know, that shouldn't be possible. Well, it is. Right now, I'm rocking 6 pieces of Severe 3. That's it. I know that some people are actually running 5 pieces with some tailoring gear. It all depends on how much crit you can get from your gear innately. Now, obviously, this is like a very, very rough draft. Like, basically, I went this crit build for Raid. I basically unpackaged it. Didn't know what the hell to do with it, played it in Raid, and it ended up being absolutely crazy. Like, it was way better than I expected. It was supposed to be really good in single target, and that's it, but it ended up being good in AoE too. So I'm really not sure like what this build is bad at. I'm still kind of exploring like how this build works and like where its like strengths and weaknesses are. Obviously, there's a lot of refinement when it comes to like raid times for like when you should combust, which talents you should pick on whatever fight, what items you should use. Right, like that all will come in time, but like I'm just saying this is like ground zero on this thing, and it was already putting out insane numbers in raid. So just to show you, my crit chance is indeed 100%. I always crit. This means that I've got all sorts of crazy options available to me, stuff that mages don't normally use. One example is Focusing Iris, right? Focusing Iris, guess what? It always crits, right? And there's actually some insane synergy here. Now, normally, if you're casting Scorch a lot, Kindling isn't very good. There's actually negative synergy with Searing Touch and Kindling. But in this case, it actually ends up being really good because all of your Pyroblasts always crit. And guess what? You are Pyroblasting a lot, right? Like your average Ignite, obviously, throughout the fight isn't going to be as high because you aren't Masterful. You don't have all that Mastery bumping up your Ignite. But your damage on your Pyroblast ends up being really good overall. And since it always crits, basically, your Combustion is down to like a 40-second cooldown, something crazy like that. If you go Visions of Perfection and you go Kindling, so yeah, basically opens the door for all sorts of cool stuff. Now you can obviously go World Vein, right? Like if you want to go World Vein, it's a good choice. Just know that your Combustion's probably going to be up before your World Vein is up. Believe it or not, that's how good this build is when it comes to getting your Combustion off cooldown. Now you might be thinking to yourself, well, what does Combustion even do, right? Like if I'm always critting, then who cares? Well, you know, what's the big deal about Combustion? Well, if you have that question, basically, what you need to consider is what Combustion actually does. So if we read the tooltip for Combustion, it says, increases your spell's crit chance by 100%, granting you mastery equal to 50% of your critical strike stat. Now, that is the important part. So obviously, our critical strike stat is through the roof. We have 100%. So just to show you an example, I'm just going to pop Combustion here and nothing else. And now if we look, our mastery goes all the way up to 74%, and this is without Blaster Master. So we have literally no stacks of Blaster Master, and already we're at 74% mastery. Now you can see where there's something here, right? Now, this is one of those builds where you actually still want Masterful for those off pieces. Once you achieve 100% crit rate, you might be thinking to yourself, well, if I'm always critting, maybe I want Strike to, right? Wrong. You actually still want Masterful, and I'll explain why. So Masterful and Severe have this weird correlation. It's not really usual. There's not really many instances where there's like double dipping involved. But in this case, there actually is a bit of double dipping. So Masterful ends up being one of our best stats. Why? Obviously, we have Blaster Master, right? Blaster Master is huge. When it comes to amping Blaster Master, I mean, that's big, right? That's the whole reason behind the Masterful build, right? But in this case, we're actually converting our crit into Mastery. And guess what? That actually gets further converted by Masterful. So it's one of those things where you know, hold on to those Masterful pieces, right? Like, obviously, you're going to want to hold all the rest of your pieces basically as Masterful instead of, you know, Severe or anything like that, because you want to be converting that crit into Mastery whenever you're combusting. And since your combustion is such a low cooldown, now you see where I'm going with this, right? There's a lot of conversion happening. So this is why Masterful ends up being really good. That's backed up by the Sims as well. We did those Sims in the stream about 2 weeks ago, and it ended up being the best, you know, other corruption to go. So basically, the idea behind the build is you want to get enough Severe so that you can have exactly 100% crit. You don't want to go above 100%. You want to just have 100%, right? And then after that, you basically want to build your stats around whatever sims best for your character, right? Now, obviously, you're going to have to sim your character. Everyone's character is going to be different. But, you know, it's one of those situations where you just have to fill out and figure out what's best for you. But in my case, it ended up being basically gear that has haste, gear that has mastery. In general, my character leaned more towards haste in the sims. But obviously, this is something where you just have to run the sims yourself and figure out what's best for you. Okay, so let's talk about in raids. So I did the raid, I live streamed it, and this build actually had some pretty good showings. I just want to show you a couple examples here. So this is Mott. Now, obviously, the other mages in the raid group are Worldvane, they are Lucid, they are playing the typical Masterful build, right? But I'm playing this new crit build, and as you can see, it ended up being pretty close, right? Still top 3 on that fight. Completely crit, completely meme. I could run around the whole time I was casting. I never had to stand still except for Rune of Power. Here's another example. Now, this fight should be my worst fight, Hive Mind, right? Hive Mind is one of those fights where it's like super giga AoE, right? You should not be able to do anywhere near this damage. Whenever we were simming out, it looked like crit build was basically really good for a single target, maybe not so good for AoE. Well, in the end, it actually ended up being pretty good. Still top 3 on this fight. Now, this is actually without even optimizing for damage. If I were to do this fight again, I would run Focusing Iris as my major, and I would just absolutely annihilate that first pack of bugs. I'd probably end up, you know, probably around where THD is if I were to run that. I think in this case, I used Worldvane. It was a mistake. I should have just gone Focusing Iris. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. This fight is Rodin still, as you can see, you know, at the top of the meter there, number 4. And, you know, once again, this is one of those things where optimizations will come. This is still the rough draft. We're comparing this build against builds that have already been used for months and months and months, right? So like you got to always keep in mind that this is something that's brand new. Haven't quite figured it out yet, right? This is just the tryout, right? But still ended up being pretty good. Now let's move on to Shadhar. And Shadhar ended up being the top mage on that. Now this is obviously like single target, so this is like the optimal setup, right? And keep in mind, right? Not just to look at the DPS meters. We also, you know, have that full mobility. There is actually a huge amount of value in just being able to run around the entire fight. And until you experience it yourself, it's kind of hard to really give you the full gist of it. I'm really excited about this build just because it opens up so many options. It's so much easier than Masterful. There's so much less, I guess, like thought process into min-maxing everything. You can just run around the whole time. Like I'd say overall, it's a more fun build. It's an easier build. It's a lot more mobile. You can also go like different majors whenever it comes to your essences, which is really cool too. So yeah, really liking this build. We'll move on to Drestagat, and on Drestagat, I always like to show Drestagat damage himself because that's what really matters on this fight. We optimize around just killing Drestagat, just like as much damage as a single target possible. Ended up being really good on that fight. And then if we move on to Carapace, another one of those fights where this build should really not hold a candle to anything else. Ended up being, let's go to damage here. Still fairly good, right? Top 2. So obviously Pieces is running the Mastery build. I am running Focusing Azerite Beam with my crit build. Ended up being pretty good, and this is before optimizing, so keep that in mind. And then on the Zoth, it wasn't too hot, but also I kind of fed on that fight, so I'm not really going to show that one because I haven't quite figured out what I'm going to do with that fight yet. The fight is like very strongly tuned around timings. I would definitely say that if you're doing the Zoth progress, going full crit on that fight and trying it out as a new build is probably not the best idea if you're still progressing. That one's going to take a little bit more to figure out. It's a little bit of a tough nut to crack there. But yeah, basically overall impressions of this build, just like first impressions, it's got insane mobility. It's really fun to play. The damage is actually insanely good. There's a lot of versatility to it because you can basically play whatever major you want. Just an all-around great build. I'm sure that this build is going to show up more and more and more as time goes on. It's a really good build. I haven't tried it in Mythic Plus, but I know that it should be pretty good there. But obviously I haven't tried it myself yet, so I can't speak to that yet. But I want to let you guys know because obviously, you know, the window for this thing is closing really soon. So if you're wanting to get in on this build, basically the investment is you need to get like 30,000 echoes. You need to spend those on severes. Obviously, if you're still working towards your masterfuls, you know, stay that path, right? This is more of a fun build for if you've already kind of figured or you kind of completed your corruptions, you're looking for something else to do. So if you're looking for something else to do with your character, it's a great build to try out. And I definitely recommend it. Very, very fun stuff here. Like I said, this is kind of the machine gun, me just giving you a new build, telling you the cliff notes on it. So the main points are, this is a build that takes about 30,000 echoes to get in on. Obviously, you're going to need some crit gear. You're going to need some sockets, right? So there's a lot of investment. If you're already going Masterful and that's already the route you've chosen, you're already in the middle progression, then, you know, probably wait until next rotation to go and have fun with this build. But if you are looking for something new, then this build is really fun. It's actually quite competitive. You can just run around like a PM hunter the whole time. I mean, like, who doesn't want to do that, right? You know, there's a lot of really fun stuff happening with this build. You know, back when I was a little boy, my pappy always told me that, you know, to be a good fire mage, you had to cast fireballs, right? And, you know, I always told him, you know, one of these days, old man, you're going to be wrong. I'm going to find a way to never cast fireball again because it's my least favorite spell. So, you know, this build, this is that coming to fruition, right? We just throw that fireball right in the trash can where it belongs. Know your place, trash. And we make best friends with Scorch, right? My friendship with Fireball has ended. Scorch is now my best friend, and it can be yours too. So for the low price of 30,000 echoes and a bunch of sockets. So yeah, not for the faint of heart. Obviously, there's a lot going on in this build. There's a lot to put down in terms of initial investment. But if you go and you make that investment, I think that this is a great build as a starter build. Now, when I say that, what I mean is like to learn Mage, right? Like I don't mean in terms of investment. I mean more in terms of like playstyle. It's really hard to mess up as this build. You can run around the whole time you're playing. You like never have to stop moving except for Rune of Power. It's really easy. It's really versatile. The damage is like really insane. So yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, like, if you aren't familiar with Mage and you're maybe just getting into this at the start and you want to set yourself a goal and you aren't really sure if you want to, like, you know, fully optimize around Masterful playstyle, I definitely recommend this build as maybe an alternative. Just because it ends up being pretty damn competitive and it's like really easy. Like I cannot emphasize enough how easy this build is to play. So yeah, definitely put it on your radar. You know, I'm trying to get this video out as soon as possible, just so as many of you guys can see it as possible and maybe get in on this build while it's still available. Obviously, if you miss it, you're gonna have to wait for the full rotation again. Right, so I'm going to be making another video where I kind of explore these ideas more and I talk about this a little bit more in depth because, you know, right now I'm just kind of machine gunning these points at you right now. So yeah, obviously it hasn't been tested in Mythic Plus, at least by me yet. I've heard it's pretty good from other people running the build, but haven't done it myself. So yeah, take that information with a grain of salt. But just know that it's a really fun build. I enjoy it. Really easy. Just kind of off the walls, right? So. Definitely give it a shot if you have some extra echoes. So anyways, if you want to, you know, catch the information on this build as it develops, definitely hit the like and subscribe on the video, and we'll see you on the next one.